The land had a way of remembering people long after they were gone. Wind traced the same paths every year, bending the grass where hooves once passed. Fence posts leaned the way old men did, tired, stubborn, still standing. And the cabin, half hidden among cottonwoods at the edge of the ravine, waited in silence like it always had. No one rode out there anymore, except Caleb Hart. Caleb had inherited more land than he ever wanted. 3 generations of cattle ranching had left him wealthy, respected, and profoundly alone. At 42, he owned thousands of acres, employed dozens of hands, and could buy anything he wanted in town. Anything except peace. The mornings were the worst. The ranch house felt too big, too quiet. His wife had died 8 years earlier, consumed by illness that moved faster than prayer. Their unborn child had gone with her. Since then, Caleb lived like a man walking through fog. He worked hard, slept little, and avoided anything that asked him to feel too much. That morning, he rode out early. Not because the cattle needed checking, but because his chest felt tight and the walls of the house were closing in again. His horse, Boone, knew the way. Boone always did. They rode past the familiar fences, beyond the grazing fields, and into land Caleb rarely visited, land that had once belonged to his grandfather. The air grew cooler near the ravine. Cottonwood leaves whispered overhead. Then Boone slowed. Caleb looked up. The cabin stood there like a memory refusing to fade. He'd heard stories about it growing up. A miner's shelter, some said. Others claimed a widow had once lived there. For years, it had been dismissed as abandoned. No one went near it. But now, smoke rose faintly from a crooked metal chimney. Caleb frowned. Someone was living there. He dismounted slowly, instincts alert. He tied Boone to a nearby tree and approached on foot. The cabin looked older up close. Rotting boards, patched roof, one small window. A single boot print marked the dirt near the door. Before he could knock, the door creaked open. A woman stood there. She was thin, wrapped in a faded wool coat far too large for her frame. Her hair, dark, tangled, fell past her shoulders. Her eyes met his, wide but steady, like someone who had learned not to flinch. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. "I don't mean any harm," Caleb said finally, lowering his hands. "I'm Caleb. I own the land around here." Her jaw tightened. "I'm not hurting anything," she replied softly. Her voice was rough, unused. "I didn't say you were." She studied him, searching for something, threat perhaps, or judgment. Whatever she found, it made her shoulders relax slightly. "My name is Eliza," she said. The silence returned, heavier now. "How long have you been here?" Caleb asked. "Long enough." He nodded. "Do you need anything?" Her eyes flicked toward the cabin, then back to him. No. That answer was a lie. He could see it in the way her coat barely closed, in the hollowness, beneath her cheekbones, in the way the cold lingered in her breath. "I won't force you to leave," he said carefully. "But winter's coming. This place won't hold." "I know." "Then why stay?" She hesitated, then said something that settled deep in his chest. "Because it's quiet, and no one looks for me here." Caleb felt something crack open. He left her with a nod, mounting Boone without another word. As he rode away, the image of her standing alone in that doorway burned into his mind. That night, he couldn't sleep. Eliza had learned to live with silence. After her husband died, the town had felt too loud, too full of eyes that watched and whispered. They whispered about the accident, about the debts, about how a woman alone should know better than to stay. She left before they could decide her fate for her. The cabin had been empty then. Broken, yes, but solid enough. She fixed what she could, learned to chop wood, learned which berries wouldn't kill her, learned how to stretch a meal into 2. Loneliness was easier than pity. But the cowboy's eyes had unsettled her, not because they were cruel, but because they weren't. They held a sadness she recognized. She didn't expect to see him again. She was wrong. The next morning, Caleb returned with a pack horse. "I brought supplies," he said simply. "Food, blankets, a lantern." "I didn't ask." "I know." He set the bags down outside her door and stepped back. "You don't owe me anything." "Why?" she asked. Caleb took a breath. "Because no one should have to survive like this." Something in his voice broke her defenses. She accepted the supplies. Over the following weeks, he came back again and again. Not every day, not intrusively. Sometimes he brought food. Sometimes he repaired the roof without asking. Sometimes he just sat on a stump nearby, speaking about nothing important. Eliza listened more than she spoke. Slowly, the walls around her heart shifted. She learned that Caleb had lost his wife, that the ranch felt empty despite its size, that he hadn't laughed freely in years, and Caleb learned that Eliza had lost everything: her husband, her home, her faith and kindness. One evening, as snow dusted the ground, Eliza asked quietly, "Why are you really helping me?" Caleb stared at the fire. "Because the day I found you, I realized I'd been isolating myself too. Just in a bigger house." Tears burned her eyes. Winter came hard. When a storm collapsed part of the cabin roof, Caleb didn't hesitate. He brought her to the ranch house. "I won't stay," she insisted. "You will until spring," he replied gently. "Then you decide." Living under the same roof changed everything. They shared meals, shared silence, shared grief. One night, Eliza admitted she'd believed kindness always came with a price. Caleb answered, "Sometimes it's just someone choosing not to walk away." By spring, Eliza no longer flinched at laughter. She planted a garden. She helped at the ranch. The hands grew fond of her quiet strength. When she finally stood at the edge of the property, ready to choose her future, Caleb said nothing, only waited. She stayed, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had finally found somewhere she belonged. And the wealthy cowboy who met a woman living in isolation learned that changing one life could finally heal his own.